Good morning, everybody. It is October 2nd, if you can believe that, 2022. This is Man Coverage. We're talking college football once again. Fall is upon us, October is here, and football is continuing. James Bonneville, how are you doing today, sir?
And it better be a crime.
I'd like to hear that. We had a couple of very, very good games yesterday. We had some big time players go down with injury. We had a top 10 upset of sorts. Had a couple other teams struggle mightily. Overall, I thought it was a pretty good day of college football. James, did you enjoy the slate that
It
we
was
saw?
interesting. I mean, you had 10 top 25 teams get beat.
Yeah,
I mean, that's immense. I mean, that's just crazy. And some of them were just, some games were just outright lunacy. I mean, even going down the outside the top 25 slate. I mean, you're seeing some real transitions in programs right now.
yeah, and you know, there's going to be some teams kind of in the top 25 and in the top 10 by default
Yeah.
this week, I think. I mean, I'm not really sure whether some of these teams that are going to get inserted into the top 10 are really top 10 teams. And we're going to talk about that today at length. We're going to kind of go into whether or not we think these teams that are probably, the rankings probably come out right now. So we'll be able to discuss it on the show, and we'll be able to talk about whether or not we think these teams are actually contenders or pretenders. I really want to dive into the top 10 and try and figure out, which ones of those teams actually belong and which ones are, as we mentioned, kind of there by default. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about numero one first. I mean, might start at the top, right? I think we have to talk about Georgia. I mean, this is
Yeah.
2 weeks in a row now where Georgia has struggled. Their offense has looked not great. And honestly, giving up 13 points in the second quarter to Missouri isn't a great look. And, and this is an SEC game, I guess, but you're not going to sit here and tell me that, like, oh, it was, they're playing an SEC opponent and impress me when it's 2-3 Missouri. Missouri's not a great football team, and I don't care what happened yesterday. I still don't think they're that good. And let's be honest, going into Farrett Field and Memorial Stadium in Columbia never really scared too many people. So I don't think this is a great win. And you couple this with last week's performance versus Kent State, and what do you got, James? What's going on with Georgia? And do you expect them to drop after the last 2 weeks' performances?
Yeah, I would. I mean, they're not going to drop out of the top three, but they can't be number one. I mean, you can't tell me for a second that Kirby Smart is sitting there going into a week against a team that has a hard time stopping the run, that you want your quarterback, who's not known through his arm strength, to throw 43 times. And
Yeah.
he went 24 for 43. Yeah, he had 312 yards, but he threw 43 times. I mean, that is insane. And you watch some of those throws, I mean, they just weren't good. They were really not good throws. I mean, you go up against the legit defensive backfield. Stetson Bennett could legitimately had 5 picks last night. I mean, it was that bad. And quite frankly, there was a time period where Missouri came away with a field goal where they were sitting first and goal on the 1 after that long Schrader run, and they got a false start and they end up having to kick a field goal. They score a touchdown there. Missouri knocks them off. And they were talking about that last night in the game. And I'm like, I don't know how this was even close to begin with. Georgia's offense looked awful. And Georgia's offense looked awful, especially in the line of scrimmage. And defensively, I mean, Missouri was banging out big plays when they needed to. And I look at this and I'm like, this is a game where Georgia should have won by 40.
Yeah, I think that was the spread, was it not? I mean,
Yeah, it was big.
it was a huge number for this game, and I expected it to be a blowout, especially after last week. Last week's performance versus Kent State. I expected Georgia to come out swinging. I expected them to get back on track, and they were very lucky to win this game. I mean, it was almost a 30-point spread, and if they don't score 14 points in the fourth quarter, they don't they don't win this game, and they lose on the road to Missouri. But the key with college football is survive and advance. So
yeah, exactly.
They did win, but I got to be honest, I wasn't really impressed with the ground game. I mean, they seem to be rotating three different backs. McIntosh, Milton, Edwards. Everybody seems to be getting around 10 carries a game. But they, I guess they're doing it by committee. That seems to be fine. But their wide receivers, to me, besides the tight end, obviously Brock Bowers, nobody's really flashing out, in my opinion. Not that they're bad. I mean, they've got obviously a lot of talent. Darnell Washington, Rosenmead, Jack Saint, Blaylock, McConkey. All those guys are good, but nobody's really blowing it up stats wise. And honestly, Stetson played good enough yesterday to get them the win. Just mainly with his legs. He was making some plays at the end of the game with the legs, and I don't know if you saw the fake field goal, but that was pretty ballsy. I got to give Curb a little credit for that one.
The one thing I keep going back to Georgia time and time again on is they try to throw the ball between the hashes. And you saw, especially later in the game, when they started going on the outside, especially the Bowers late in the game, that's when they started picking up their big chunks of yards. But this has been a chronic problem of Kirby Smart since he's been at Georgia. I mean, honestly, I look at the receiving core, and I think two guys I think been really underserved are Dominic Blaylock, Mookie's kid. You may not remember Mookie from his time with the Atlanta Hawks and back when he was at Oklahoma as a basketball player. Former All-Star. I mean, if this kid stays healthy and they allow him to go on the outside more rather than trying to do everything in the middle, I think this kid's got real talent. And Arian Smith, who's just a burner. But he's not a guy who's going to do a 10 yards in type of route. He likes to stay on the outside, and it almost like seems like it'd be justified for him to transfer to a program like, I don't know, Alabama, where they're going to throw the ball to the outside.
Yeah, this is kind of who they are on offense. It's, nothing shocking. I guess we shouldn't be surprised that they aren't dropping 50, 60 points because that's not really who they are on offense.
No, they're
this
not.
Is a team that leans on their defense and, plays good enough on offense to win. They have a good, supposedly a good offensive line, and they run the football and set the pass up with the run. But these 2 weeks in a row, to me, first off, should signify a drop in the polls. I mean, I just you can't drop Ohio State for beating Notre Dame by 11 and then allow Georgia to struggle with Kent State and then nearly lose to Mizzou and not go backwards. I just think you got to take each game into account when you're voting, and we'll see if the voters actually do that or if they just toe the company SEC line and keep the status quo. I mean, I don't know what you think, but I really do think they should drop.
I do too. I mean, and granted, things are easier yet for Georgia next week. They got home against Auburn and home against Vandy. I mean, we're not talking like a juggernaut. I mean, the hardest game they've played right now, if you look at on paper, would be Oregon, who looks worlds better now than they did that first game of the year, much like Utah, who we'll talk about later on.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, that's what I kind of expected was that Georgia would be getting better. And I'm not sure that I see that with their offense, at least. And I don't know. We'll see what happens as they've got coming up next week. They play Auburn. So, Auburn's not great, but I think if Mizzou is going to give them a decent test, I think Auburn may do so as well.
Absolutely.
So we'll see what happens there. But, I wasn't 100% shocked to see them struggling with Missouri. I mean, this is a team that won a bunch of close games the last few years, and they're not afraid to be in close games with a guy who's been there for 6 years playing quarterback. I think they trust Stetson, and I think they trust their ground game, and they trust their defense. So I don't think they were at all concerned, being down going into the second half. And I didn't think they would lose. I really didn't. I was like, there's no way they lose this game. I just, Mizzou was kind of playing out of their minds, but I didn't think they would be able to keep it up. But we've got to stay in the SEC because there was one top 10 team that did lose, and that was the Kentucky Wildcats. Now, whether or not Kentucky is actually the number 7 team in the country, I don't know. I kind of don't think so. But honestly, I think I'm going to just go ahead and say it. I think Will Levis is the most overrated player in college football. I mean, I keep hearing all these folks talking about how he's a first-round draft pick, and I don't see that at all. He's good. He's got some skills. He may be a quarterback at the next level. Do I see him as a starter in the NFL? No, I do not. This team is built on their defense and their run game. And, Will Levis is Will Levis. But, I wasn't surprised at all to see them go down to Ole Miss yesterday. Ole Miss is not Ole Miss of last year. They're not a team that can score 30, 40 points consistently either. Anymore. I mean, Jackson Dart's doing a pretty good job running the offense, but I don't think he's as good as Matt Corral, definitely, in this offense. And Ole Miss is more of a running team, in my opinion, the way that they, been having success. But they come out with a big play on defense, and that's what's, I guess, I really took away from this game is that the Ole Miss defense has really, surprised me and has really impressed me. They've turned over several teams the last few weeks. I think Kentucky had lost 2 different fumbles, and they were big ones. The one was to seal the game. So
yeah,
I'm pretty impressed with Ole Miss's defense, and I think you've got to give Lane Kiffin credit for what he's done with the transfer portal, bringing these kids in that are becoming big impact players for Ole Miss. What did you think about the Cats going down, and what's your overall feeling about the Rebels at this point? They got to be in the top 10 now, right?
I would think so. I mean, I think a name that there were so many names going into the year that people wanted to talk about with Ole Miss. I mean, you look at Jackson Dart, the transfer from SC, and from TCU. I mean, there's just a lot of real possibilities there. Hold on a second. My background, something was background on my screen, like going nuts. The Keyshawn Judkins, though, the freshman out of Pine Road, Alabama. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know much about him going into the year, but the more I start looking at his recruitment, how in the world was this guy only a 3-star athlete? I mean, you look at his recruiting, it was insane. Like, we're talking, I mean, it came down to Ole Miss and Notre Dame for where this kid went to school. He had offers from Arkansas, Auburn, Florida. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, Florida State, Georgia Tech. I mean, this kid had like 20 Power 5 offers. And he's only a 3-star. And you look at the way this kid plays, there's a reason why he's on the field. This kid's a really good running back and is going to make things very difficult in the SEC West, combining him with Zach Evans.
Yeah, I mean, they're extremely deep at running back, in my opinion. I mean, they've got several guys that can go in there and get it done, throughout the season. I mean, they've got Judkins, who's actually their leading rusher with over 530 yards and 6 touchdowns. They've got Zach Evans, who's also almost running at 6 yards a clip. They've got Jackson Dart, who's running at over 6 yards a carry. And then they have Ulysses Bennett, the 4th, who also is running over 5 yards a carry in a limited role. So they've got some serious depth, in my opinion, at running back, and that's what you need going down the stretch. I've been pretty impressed with the way they've been running the football. I believe that Bentley was a transfer from SMU and played there for 3 years and was pretty solid there, and he can barely get on the field for Ole Miss, and I think that tells you something about Ole Miss's run game and about their offense right now. I mean, I think they're rolling pretty good, and this was a huge win for them. I mean, I get it. I'm not that impressed with Kentucky. I'm not a stern believer in Will Levis, but let's be honest, it was the seventh ranked team in the country coming in to play in Ole Miss, and they took care of business. And I was very impressed with that defense, especially turning over Kentucky twice when they were going in to score, especially there at the end. That was a huge play. And they've got some playmakers on defense. They've used that portal to really build this team up. And, the old question looms, does Lane stick around Ole Miss and, see this thing through? Or, does he jump ship after the season? I think that's something that some people have speculated over the past few years, but let's focus on the now, right? They're going to be a top 10 team, and they're going to be coming off a bye week when they play Alabama this year. Do you think, I know this is looking ahead a little bit, but after watching them win yesterday and play as well as they did against Kentucky, can you see them knocking off Bama with a bye week before?
Honestly, you look at their schedule, there's a realistic possibility they're going to be undefeated going into that November 12th game. Next week you got next week at Vanderbilt. That's a win. Home against Auburn. That's a win. At LSU. LSU is just not, you look at their schedule and what their record is, they're not that good. That's a win. A&M, at A&M, unless the shoe falls off, that's a win. Now you're walking in a week off before you play Bama at home. That's going to be interesting in that stadium in Oxford, Mississippi.
Yeah, exactly what I was thinking. And, we'll see what happens. But I do feel like watching Bama play and watching Ole Miss play, with a bye week before, like I said, I think it is a very, very winnable game for them. And I wouldn't count them out of the SEC West. I think they have a legitimate chance to win the SEC West, which no one really gave them coming into the season, with Matt Corral graduating, with the running back leaving, with their two edge rushers both taking off, the middle linebacker, the transfer from Maryland, also leaving last year. They lost a lot of guys, but he replenished that roster very well using the portal. So I think we got to give Lane some credit for that. And speaking about Bama and whether Ole Miss can beat them, we need to talk about Bama too. That was a big matchup yesterday playing Arkansas. It was kind of a game of runs where, Bama scored first and then Arkansas went on a little bit of a run and took the lead. And then Bama came back and had a run of their own to kind of close it out. Bryce Young goes down with an injury. That didn't seem to stop Bama's offense. I kind of thought it may, but it didn't. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this kid that came in to replace Bryce Young when he went down. What did you know about Jalen Milroe before yesterday? And what did you think about his performance in a big-time game against number 20 Arkansas?
Want to know something? I don't know much about him, to tell you the truth. There's been so much focus on Bryce Young that you really never heard much about their backups. I'm just doing a little background on him right now. He was a 4-star coming out, very highly thought of. Number 13 quarterback in that 2021 class out of Katy, Texas. So it's Tompkins High School. But, it's a little different when you're playing for Alabama because the pressure really gets on you, especially when you're coming in to take over for a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback that's gotten hurt. But you're right. It was a game of runs. Bama started off 28-0 and you thought the boat race was on, and Arkansas climbed back in to make a 1-score game. And then, as you said during our pregame, they gave up, and Alabama and Milroe especially really stuck it to him. Jamar Gibbs had a phenomenal game. You could definitely see his draft stock really going up after watching this game going into next year.
Yeah, I kind of watch other teams play in college football, and almost almost every single one of them I see has a really good player from Georgia Tech on their team. And Georgia Tech wasn't good when they had all these guys. So, I think that's why we saw Jeff Collins get fired. They had some talent there, but just couldn't get it done. But huge day for Jahmyr Gibbs, 18 carries, 206 yards, over 11 yards a carry, had 2 touchdowns, 76 yard long. I think he had 2 actually really long runs, over 50 yards. So that was a huge day for them. They don't win that game if Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't have that type of performance. But I thought the kid came in, Milroe came in and played well. I mean, I don't think he's there yet as far as throwing the football goes. But, hell, when you can run like that, you don't really need to throw the football. There was no really no call for him to throw the ball. He didn't really need to. The offensive line was phenomenal yesterday for Alabama, I thought. I mean, they ran for over 317 yards, and that's including the sack yardage. So very impressive performance by the Alabama offense, putting up 50 points on an Arkansas team that honestly going into that game could have been undefeated. Now, I know they lost the week before thanks to some, pretty crazy plays and a missed field goal. But, putting up 50 on Arkansas was impressive in my opinion. And I think the Tide are right where they want to be, honestly, right now. I think Alabama is the number 1 team in the country, if you ask me, after that performance yesterday, dropping 50 on Arkansas. You agree with that?
I'm not so sure quite yet. I would put them 1 or 2. I mean, I just keep looking at Alabama right now, and if they're going to win the BCS national championship, it's going to be because Cody Prentice, Isaiah Bond, and JoJo Early take that next step in maturity. I mean, you're relying a lot on, Jermaine Burton is just not taking that next step since he transferred from Georgia. So they're relying really heavy on those young freshman, sophomore receivers, which they've never had to do before. I mean, they've always had, if they do have a freshman there, they've had somebody else with some depth and maturity on that receiving course. So, they're going to have the work cut out for them.
Yeah, well, who do you put number 1? You leave Georgia at number 1. Do you move the Buckeyes up?
I'd move the Buckeyes. I'd move the Buckeyes up.
Yeah, I'm looking at Herb Street's top 4 right now, and he's got Ohio State, Bama, Georgia, and Michigan, and then Clemson and Oklahoma State after that. So I think I would give him some credit with that. That sounds pretty right, but we definitely need to talk about Clemson here. Clemson didn't look great in their opener. I watched it against Georgia Tech, a team we just talked about. They struggled a little bit. The offense looked a lot like it did last year. But since that time, I feel like they've gotten better. Now, they're missing a bunch of guys yesterday. They were missing Breezy on defense. They were missing a couple of linebackers. Trotter got hurt during the game. They were missing several defensive backs, and then they had their safety get thrown out for targeting. So they weren't at full strength, but yet they were still able to pretty much handle NC State. And, I haven't been real high on Clemson this year, but I do think we need to give them a little bit of credit for, winning that game last week against Wake Forest, and then also, taking care of business at home against NC State yesterday. What are you thinking about Clemson right now, and what's your opinion on their offense?
Honestly, they look worlds better. DJU looks actually somewhat comfortable in the pocket, which we couldn't really say last year. That Georgia game messed with his mind so much, and it transferred the entire season, and everybody thought the sky was falling because Clemson won, that's right, 10 games. Honestly, you look at it, the defense hasn't been living up to where they should be. When you give up that many points last week, and it's not like North Carolina State's is this huge juggernaut. DJU really managed the game. He looked really good out there. Now, is he to the potential everybody thought he would? No, but quite frankly, I think losing that 20 pounds makes him more efficient quarterback, and he's realizing how to really work a game overall. I mean, heck, 3 of the touchdowns came out of DJU's hands yesterday.
Yeah. Well, I thought that's where, Clemson beat NC State was on the ground. DJU, when they needed a big play, was getting it done with his legs. And I don't think he does that a year ago. I think losing the weight, improving his, overall speed and endurance really has paid off for him. And he's not the greatest, passing quarterback I've ever seen. I mean, 21 of 30, 209 yards, 7 yards a pass, 1 touchdown, QBR of 82.4. That's, it's not great. It's not pedestrian by any stretch against a top 10 team, but he does seem comfortable back there. Like you were saying, I think he seems more confident in himself. They're definitely blocking for him a little bit better. So that offensive line has improved. And, Will Shipley is a good running back. I like what I've seen out of him. Not huge numbers yesterday, but he had some big runs at big times. And then, on third down, I saw several times where it's third down and 5+, and DJU would take it off the edge and pick it up. But my big thing is who's the number 1 wide receiver on this team? Can you tell me?
I cannot. I mean, honestly, you would say it should be Nagata, but I can't tell.
2 catches for 19 yards yesterday.
I know.
Nagata?
I know. Yeah.
That's my point. I mean, there's not this T. Higgins. There's not the Sammy Watkins. There's not the DeAndre Hopkins. They've always had this guy, or sometimes 2 guys who are just like lights out, get them the ball when you need it. I don't see that guy on this roster this year. I mean, they've got some talent, and I think they have some talented wide receivers, but I just don't see from a production standpoint, who the hell is their number 1 wideout? I mean, I don't know. It seemed like yesterday the biggest target was the tight end, Briningstool.
Yeah,
I love
that's a name that rolls off your lips. Yeah, I mean, the one thing coming back to this game was, and this is the maturity factor I like about DJU this year compared to last year, is he felt like he had to win every game and every throw. Like he had to go deep. This game, he took what they gave him, and he did a lot of dump offs. I mean, he was keeping things low and doing high percentage throws. I mean, quite frankly, I wish it was a little bit higher on his completion percentage, but compared to where he was last year, this is infinitely better because I think there was just too much expectations based off that Notre Dame game. And then who was the other game against where he had back-to-back games when Lawrence was out?
BC.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think everybody was ready to put him as the number 1 pick in the draft after the spot duty when Lawrence went down. But last year, definitely changed his direction. But I like what I've seen with him. I really am impressed with the way that he's come back and, played with confidence, the way that he's took command of this team, even with a young freshman kid, Cade Klubnik, coming in behind him and pushing him. I think that's helped him. And I think
agreed.
We have to give him credit for what he's done. How good can this Clemson team be? They beat Wake Forest. Great. They beat NC State. We'll see how good that is. NC State should have lost to East Carolina earlier in the year, if not for a missed extra point and a missed field goal from 30 yards. So I'm not sure how in love I am with those 2 teams. Can Clemson beat any of the big 3? I mean, I don't think so. Do you?
I don't. No. I mean, unless the defense really takes a step up. I mean, they've got the potential, especially in that front 7, to do that, but I'm not really trusting their D-backs quite yet to make that next step, especially against an Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State could drop a 50 on them because there's just so many options. I mean, with a Georgia, yeah, I could see it. With an Alabama, I could see it unless those receivers really step up. I think it's a lot harder to defend Bryce Young than it is Stetson Bennett for obvious reasons. So.
Well, I just think about last week and, Sam Hartman carving up that secondary.
Yeah.
And I feel like yesterday, NC State's quarterback I just missed some throws. NC State's kind of supposed to be known for their offensive line. They've been putting guys in the league the last few years, but they just didn't seem to hold up as well yesterday. I mean, they gave up 3 sacks. There was 5 QB hurries. There was 5 passes defense. So Clemson did get after it pretty good on defense, but I just wasn't really impressed with Devin Leary from NC State. A lot of his yards came at the end of the game when, Clemson was kind of just trying to keep the lead. And I felt like, I just wasn't that impressed with him. And I guess, this is the ACC world that we live in, where none of these teams from the ACC are really blowing me away. I mean, Clemson, I guess, is the best one out of default, but I don't see them hanging with the big 3 as they were. They're just not back there yet.
The longest play on the ground yesterday for NC State was 8 yards.
Yeah. The run defense was unbelievable. They stuffed the run all day long. NC State kept trying to run it because they didn't want to just become one-dimensional, but it was almost like they knew every time they were going to run it, they were going to basically gain 0 yards. I mean, they pretty much understood that. So that's a great point. I'm glad you mentioned that because I didn't really hit on that, but I watched the entire game, and running the football was just not happening for NC State at all.
Well, heck, DJU had more yards on one play running the ball than NC State did the entire game.
Yeah.
The defense showed up on shutting down that run and tried to make them one-dimensional. And
I've seen NC State have a good run game against other teams and at other times. Jordan Houston, Sumo Karniambe. I've seen both those guys, do pretty well. But last night the run defense was just on point, and we got to talk here in a minute. I guess let's just go ahead and talk about it now. We'll kind of flip flop the games, but Clemson's defensive coordinator is gone. He was there for however many years, and I'm talking about Coach Venables, obviously the former defensive coordinator who's now the head coach at Oklahoma. I don't see much of a drop off, honestly, with him gone and him moving to Oklahoma. But I do see a drop off between Lincoln Riley moving to USC and Venables taking over Oklahoma. I mean, that was just a crap show yesterday against TCU. What did you think when you saw that halftime score that I texted you? That was 40? Was it 47 to
41-17?
Yeah, 41-17. Thank you. 41-17 at halftime. TCU over Oklahoma. What did you think about when you saw that? And what did you think about when you saw the final of this game? I mean, last week, going down to K-State, we kind of expected, but I did not expect them to lose to the Horned Frog. Did you?
I did not. I mean, I knew it was going to be high scoring because Sonny Dykes just – we've seen it. It's not Sonny – it is Sonny Dykes. Yeah, Sonny Dykes, it just is such a up-tempo guy at TCU. And, but dropping almost 700 yards on Oklahoma, I did not see that coming. I mean, they came out fast and furious and just didn't let up one bit. I mean, heck, TCU didn't know who their starting quarterback was until Thursday or Friday going into the game, because they've been transitioning quarterbacks because Duggan sometimes has been good, sometimes is not. Well, man, he showed up, and he showed up in a major way and literally laid the wood to Oklahoma. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen Oklahoma get boat raced like this. It was incredible.
The last time they got beat the last time a team put 50 points on them in Norman was 1998. And that was
Bob Stoops for rookie year as a coach at Oklahoma.
Exactly. And that was the last time they had a defeat like this. But, I was honestly a little blown away. I mean, I did not expect I did not expect TCU to. I thought they might win, but I just can't sit here and tell you that I thought they would blow them out. And Max Duggan, as you mentioned, hasn't even been the starter all year long. And yesterday, he looked like a Heisman Trophy candidate. I mean, 23 of 33, 302 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and then he ran 5 times for 116 yards and 2 more touchdowns. So, Max Duggan accounted for 5 TDs. And if you told me that guy was going to light up the Oklahoma Sooners defense like that, I would have told you were potentially crazy. But now the Sooners are 3-2. They're going to drop out of the top 25. We know the fans in Norman pretty well. What the hell are they going to say about this? I can't imagine they're going to be real happy.
Well, I mean, is Dylan Gabriel even going to play next week? I mean, that's a legitimate concern if I'm a Sooners fan right now, because if he's out, I mean, there's a drop off at quarterback after Dylan Gabriel. And
yeah. And did he get banged up yesterday?
Yeah, he got hurt. He got hit pretty. Some people, I've rewatched it. I didn't think it was that bad. I mean, some people are saying it was a cheap shot, but I mean, you got to remember they're coming off 2 losses and going into Red River. And you can't tell me Texas isn't getting up for that. Now thinking, I mean, hell, a couple weeks ago, Texas was probably thinking, this could be a boat race. Now I'm wondering, could Texas win this game? And you want to talk about a shot in the arm to the UT program. Beat Oklahoma on the Red River, and recruiting suddenly is going to change really quick.
Oh, I think Texas is going to win this game. Supposedly Quinn Ewers is going to be back.
Yep.
I hear that he is ready to go and slated to start this ball game. So I'm definitely taking Texas, especially if Dylan Gabriel can't go. I think Texas will win this ball game. I know they lost to Texas Tech, but that was with no Quinn Ewers. And the last time Ewers was playing, in case people forgot, they were beating Alabama and looking pretty damn good. So I think this will be an interesting game to see. I mean, what happens if Oklahoma loses 3 in a row? I mean, there's going to be some freaked out boomer Sooners, are there not?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, nothing would make me laugh harder than to see Texas and Oklahoma the year they announced they're going to the SEC and neither go to the Big 12 championship, which is a very realistic possibility right now, folks. I mean,
oh, yeah.
This is going to be an interesting. I mean, you want to talk about an interesting conference? The Big 12 is it.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and I think that in my opinion, the best team is Oklahoma State.
Absolutely.
I think they have a really legitimate chance of taking over this conference and winning the conference championship. And I really give them credit for the victory yesterday, taking down a pretty damn good Baylor team who played well yesterday. I mean, it wasn't like Baylor no-showed. They played pretty good. They were doing their Dave Aranda analytics. When I saw them go for it, it was 4th and 1. They were on their own, I think they were on their own 14-yard line, and they went for it. And I was like, what? Did they just go for it on 4th and 1 on their own 14-yard? I mean, they picked it up, but I was just like, holy crap, this is hardcore analytics here from old Dave Aranda. But, I just have to give credit to the Oklahoma State team. I didn't think they would be that good this year, losing obviously their defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, to Ohio State. They had several other guys that were big components in that team last year. Their middle linebacker, who was 4-year starter and the leader of that team, Rodriguez, who left and went to got drafted by the Detroit Lions. I just thought that it might be a step back this year for Oklahoma State, but not so fast, my friend. They're still playing good defense, and they scored 36 points on Baylor and Dave Aranda. So what do you think about Oklahoma State? How good is this team? And are they the favorite to win the Big 12 right now?
I would say they are. I mean, really, this team is really relying on Spencer Sanders, who his career has been weird to say the least. I mean, when you have a guy that started 4 years straight and you sit there and question from year to year how good the guy is. I mean, you go back to his freshman year in 2019. He threw for 2,000 yards, had 16 touchdowns, but 11 interceptions. 2020, 2,000 yards, 14 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. 2021, 2,800 yards, 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. I mean, that's a really high touchdown to interception ratio. This year, though, he's already got over 1,000 yards through 4 games, 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I mean, we're talking, yeah, you're talking a 5.5 touchdown to interception ratio. And that's a great stat to have. I mean, you get above 3-1, you're doing great.
Yeah, I mean, I was very impressed with him yesterday. He was doing kind of the same thing DJU was doing, where he was picking up third downs. He was keeping drives alive with his legs, not throwing, bad balls. I mean, Blake Shapen had over 340 yards passing and 2 touchdowns, but the 2 picks I thought were bad. And I thought this Oklahoma State defense really impressed me. I believe we got to give credit to Derek Mason, do we not?
I agree.
I
agree. I mean, they didn't just lose Malcolm Rodriguez. They lost a lot on that defense.
Oh, yeah.
And it is impressive how I thought they were going to have to score 30 just to stay in games. And, I mean, granted, next week you're at home against Texas Tech. Texas Tech's going to do. They're going to throw the ball. But as long as Spencer Sanders controls the ball, not turn it over, I got to give it to Oklahoma State right now. And you look at the rest of their schedule. I mean, the hardest games they got, their road games on the way out at TCU, at Kansas State, at Kansas, at OU. It ain't going to be easy because the Big 12 just isn't easy this year.
Yeah, no, I am very, very impressed with Coach Gundy and the way that his teams have played the last 2 years. I just think that people don't give them enough credit for what Oklahoma State has done. And I really could see them, especially with Oklahoma State and with Texas the way they are, beating Baylor yesterday. I mean, who's going to challenge Oklahoma State at this point?
Well, the part I don't understand.
TCU?
Yeah, I don't understand how everybody undergrades Oklahoma State every single year. I mean, you look at it's not like Mike Gundy just became the coach this year. He's been the coach there since 2005. And he's gone to a bowl game every year since 2006. I mean, it's like you almost have to mark him down for 8 wins at a minimum every year. He's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 game teams that had over 10 wins, 2 of which they had 12. And we still sit there and downgrade Oklahoma State when they're a quality program.
Yeah, no, I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves. I've been totally, like I said, blown away by the teams the last 2 years and how they played. And yesterday was a big game down in Waco. And, they felt like they were going to win the whole time. I mean, Xavier Benson, linebacker, had 10 tackles and was all over the field. They had Brock Martin played a good game, had a sack and a tackle for loss. Their defensive line, pretty much held the rushing game in check. I mean, Richard Reese had 17 carries for 85 yards, but, it wasn't like they were just running all over Oklahoma State. They were holding the running game down, and they were making plays in the passing game when they needed to. And they're my favorite now to win that conference, and I think they have a legit chance potentially making this playoff. I mean, I don't know how high they jump after yesterday's win, but that was a top 16 win, and we had several teams lose. So somebody's got to go up here, right?
Well, and remember at the end of the day, the mullet, remember, he's the man. He's a man. You go after him. You don't go after his kids. He's 40. He's 40. He's a man.
He's like 60 now, but hey, you know what? You got to give the guy credit who
he's used his job to get some raises over the years. He's used the Tennessee job becoming available like 9 times as a way to continue to get raises. It's pretty impressive what he's done there, and I think he deserves all the credit in the world. So
I mean, the guy develops talent like Kirk Ferentz does at Iowa. I mean, you underrate them, and what do? They're good for 8 minimum every year.
Yeah, I mean, he really doesn't get the 5 stars like Georgia and Bama and Ohio State does, but he gets guys that will fit his system and that can end up helping him win ball games, and it's been working. So we got to give a lot of credit to him and the Oklahoma State Cowboys. I think they are definitely a top 10 team now, and we'll see what goes on from here. But next week's game is going to have big implications on the rest of the Big 12 with Texas and Oklahoma squaring off. Are they still playing that in Dallas?
Yeah, it's still at the Cotton Bowl.
All right, that's what I figured. So we'll have to keep our tabs on that game. But we need to also discuss a coach who's not really doing the job. We talk about Coach Gundy and the mullet making things happen, doing more with less, I guess we should say. How about somebody doing less with more? I mean, no one had a bigger recruiting class than Texas A&M last year. No one has as many 5 stars as he does, except maybe, Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama, and potentially Clemson. But Texas A&M has just as many 5 stars as those guys do. They got some guys to transfer there who are also highly rated guys, but they can't seem to win. And they've already lost to Appalachian State. Maybe it's just teams with the name State because they lost to Appalachian State. And then yesterday, they pretty much got their asses kicked by Mississippi State. What the hell's going on in College Station? And what do you think they're going to be talking about at Yale practice this week?
On the flip side, they don't play another game in the rest of the schedule that has the word state in their name. Okay. So I think that helps them out unless they go to a bowl game. But the schedule doesn't get easier for them. They got a little game next week. You may have heard of this team. It's called Alabama.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of shit talking going on this offseason.
Oh, was there?
Just a little bit. And, I mean, you look at A&M's offense and, oh, my God. I mean, at some point, are they going to do a throwback game where they're going to throw leather helmets on, too, as well, and make the offense play defense, too? I mean, this offense is just prehistoric. And
it's bad.
I mean, he went from being the quarterback whisperer to – man, it can't get much worse than this. I think the boosters got to put pressure on him to bring in an OC to change this offense to something other than old school, 1980s. Heck, anybody can predict it at this point. You watch them set up in formation at the line of scrimmage, you can practically predict the play. I mean, Devin Achane right now has got to be just frustrated because his draft stock is just taking a beating based on the way this offense is set up. And still yesterday, 16 carries, 111 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, you put him in a more high-profile offense, I mean, we could be talking Heisman Trophy numbers possibly. He's a legit running back that nobody knows about because this offense is they run so few plays. There's no immediacy to these guys at all.
No, and we thought, potentially putting Max Johnson in might spark the offense. I really don't think it has. I don't know. I mean, I'm not really impressed with him either. I mean, Haynes King played some yesterday as well, but it doesn't seem to matter which of these guys is out there. Neither one of them is really a guy to me that can, bury the needle.
Well, here the real question should be, who's the backup offensive coordinator? Because that's, that should be the position they should be looking at. I mean, Haynes King is legitimate talent. I mean, this kid's a high school legend, and he is being literally morphed into something that is like watching Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. I mean, it's just there's no originality to this offense whatsoever. and they're going to get beat next week. I mean, it's not even a question of if. It's a question of how bad Saban really wants to rub it in. And Saban never is usually that much of a, wants to rub it in that bad. So they're going to beat him, but they're not going to humiliate him.
I don't know. I don't know about that. These guys don't seem to like each other very much. And, I think Nick Saban was very vocal in that he felt like they bought all these players and took some guys that, Bama was wanting to sign. And, Texas A&M just gave them more money and paid these guys to come there. And everyone knows it. And Saban called him out for it. And, he started to fire back, like that Alabama's cheating or something. I mean, Alabama doesn't really need to cheat. People want to go there because they win the national championship every single season. So I don't know. I just think there's some bad blood between these two guys. And did we ever find out, did he hand off the play calling duties away? Because
there was talk of it, but I don't know if it actually happened.
It still looks like the same guy calling the plays, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, the real game, if I'm an A&M fan where I could see the wheels completely falling off the bus, that's at when they play at South Carolina the week or 2 weeks after they play Alabama. I mean, if they struggle with South Carolina, that's when I'm a booster and I'm like, I start questioning all the money we just dumped into this guy because
$100 million.
I mean, holy crap. I mean, they cannot, if they lose to South Carolina, they're not going to a bowl game. And you want to talk about an epic collapse of a team that people put as high as number 4 to not go to a bowl game, man. There's going to be some questions going around in College Station.
Yeah. Can we just talk about the preseason top 25? I mean, we've talked ad nauseum about how they shouldn't do it. And if we go back and look, Notre Dame was ranked number 5. Texas A&M was ranked number 6. Oklahoma was ranked number 9. I mean, what a disaster. I mean, these teams had no business being in the top 10 to begin with. And it just seems to keep getting worse each week, especially for A&M. I mean, I don't know where they go from here, honestly, because yesterday was an ass kicking by a team who, honestly, in my opinion, is not that great. I mean, Mississippi State's okay. They do have a 4-1 record right now, but they've only played – this was only their second game in the SEC, and the first one they lost. So Will Rogers looked great against A&M's defense, who's supposed to be known for their defense. But so far, Mississippi State lost to LSU 31-16, and it's not like we're ready to hand the trophy to Brian Kelly this year. Every other team that Mississippi State's played is not that great. So I think A&M's in trouble. I really do. I don't know why they were ranked 17th still, because I don't think they're even close to the 17th ranked team. But they've got Bama next week, as you mentioned. South Carolina after that, they could potentially win that game. But then they play Ole Miss, Florida, Auburn, UMass, and then LSU. I mean, they could lose every one of those games realistically,
except UMass.
But that's
well.
UMass.
I mean, I've got a problem not only with the first preseason poll, because I think it's all based on hype from the past. Well, Oklahoma's been good before, and they're a brand name, so we got to put them higher. And there's a lot of recency bias too with teams that did well last year, but they could have lost a lot. I mean, with A&M, it was all based on their they had a decent year last year. They beat Alabama on that lucky game where Zach Calzada, where quite frankly, you got to wonder how bad he is when he's buried on the depth chart at Auburn, and Auburn's awful. But then you go beyond that throughout the month of September, and you see people reapplying the same manner because they don't want to look stupid that they're downgrading a team too much because of an early loss. I mean, heck, Tulane beats Kansas State 2 weeks ago. Last week loses to Southern Miss, yet went up in the polls. How is that possible? You went up in the polls, yet you lost to Southern Miss.
I don't know. That's kind of what I was asking there. I'm not sure who votes on this crap, but a lot of them should get their votes revoked because it's a freaking joke. But I do want to talk about the Big Ten real quick.
You bet.
We've got to go over. Iowa had a chance to win a big game, having Michigan come into town. They really didn't show up. Me and you both predicted that and expected that, so nothing really to report there.
Now, we did have some excitement in the Ohio State game. I don't know if you saw the very end. A lot of people had changed the channel. I, of course, was still watching because I care. But, we throttled them. I mean, it was embarrassing. Realistically, if we'd kept our starters in and kept the foot on the gas, the Buckeyes could have scored 100 points. But it's third down and long. They're lined up to punt. The punter, I guess, sees the, Sea of Galilee split in front of him. So instead of punting it, he tucks it and runs for a first down. And, of course, he's standing out of bounds and gets drilled because, Rutgers was pissed off about it. And their fight breaks out. And Schiano runs across the field, and instead people think he's going over there to break up the fight. Well, no, he comes over there to put his finger in the face of Ryan Day and starts a whole nother heated exchange, which I don't know if you saw, but it was
I did.
It was very, very interesting. First off, what did you think about the Buckeyes' performance? As I mentioned, no Jackson Smith and Jigba, no Travion Henderson, and they still had one guy, Ryan Williams, run for almost 200 yards and 5 touchdowns on the Rutgers defense. And, CJ Stroud looked sharp. What did you think about the Buckeyes' performance? And what did you think about old douchebag Schiano coming to get in Ryan Day's face?
I think let's talk about Schiano first. I thought he did it to motivate his team. Do I think it's a good move? No, but I thought he did to motivate his team. Now, Rutgers is infinitely better than they were in previous administrations, but offensively, they're still a freaking train wreck. But and I know that Ohio State was going to roll all over them because they just have better personnel as a whole. By and large, everybody just thinks of the top guys in Henderson and Jackson Smith and Jigba. That receiving core is so flippin' deep that you got number 3 receivers. That would be number 1 receivers on practically all college football teams across the country. This has gotten crazy how good that Ohio State offense is. And, it's going to be tough to beat them moving ahead.
Yeah, like I said, I just was really, really impressed with the way that this offense has continued to roll with no Henderson and no Smith and Jigba. Those are 2 guys that were in the Heisman race prior to the season. And, we're the 2 best offensive players for the Buckeyes last year. And neither one of them has really played a ton this whole year. Jackson Smith and Jigba's played 3 plays. Travion Henderson's really, didn't play at all yesterday, and it's kind of been, used in spot duty. So the fact that the offense has rolled like they have without, those 2 guys, and especially without Jackson Smith and Jigba, has really impressed me. And I think we have to give credit to Ryan Day and his play calling. I think we can honestly say that Ryan Day's better than Jimbo Fisher at running an offense. And calling plays. I think that's pretty apparent.
Well, honestly, Mayan Williams doesn't get near the credit he deserves. He gets overshadowed so quickly based on who the top guy is. This kid's a real talent. He's a big kid who's fast, and he can hit hard.
He's a bowling ball. He's a human bowling ball. He had 21 carries, 189 yards yesterday. That's 9 yards a pop. He had 5 touchdowns. He had a 70-yard touchdown run. This is a guy who's the Buckeyes' short yardage guy, and he busts a 70-yard run. I think, if you think about this game yesterday, they win 49-10. The Buckeyes only scored 1 touchdown in the fourth quarter and put in the backups and called the dogs off. Not according to Greg Schiano, but, he's an idiot. So if you don't want the other team to score, then stop them. But, CJ Stroud goes 13 and 22, 154 yards on the day, and they still score 49 points. I think this really is a testament, in my opinion, to the improvement of the offensive line over last year and this year
much so.
with Ohio State. Do you not agree with me on that?
Agreed, 100%.
I mean, you got Paris Johnson now at left tackle. You've still got DeJuan Jones at right tackle, but the guys in the middle, I think, are better. And I honestly believe Paris Johnson's a better left tackle than Petit Free, who played last year and now is on the Tennessee Titans. I like Paris Johnson better.
Agreed.
And he was a bigger recruit, but you never know what these guys are going to do until they get out there. And Paris Johnson's played some, but he played a lot at guard last year, and we really didn't know what he was going to do at tackle until he got out there, and was really impressed with him. But we need to real quick also go out to the West. What the hell is going on in the in the Big Ten West? Did not see that coming yesterday from your Gophers. Purdue has not looked good all year, but put together a game yesterday where they took down the Gophers. What happened in that game, and what's your feeling overall in the Big Ten West? Who's going to end up winning this thing? I mean, I had Minnesota pegged until yesterday's game. Give me the lowdown. What happened yesterday to the Gophers, and what's going to happen with the West?
Well, honestly, you look at Purdue. The one thing I think people are overestimating or underestimating right now is their two losses. They lost 2 one-possession games right at the end, one to Penn State and one to Syracuse. Now, have they looked completely great? No, but I got to give Jeff Brom's strategy yesterday a lot of credit. They were going to stack the box, and even with Ibrahim out, Siaraka and Flack decided they were going to try to pound the ball, and when they did throw it, there was a ton of drops, and it was just a really ugly game. And I could have seen it that they were going to lose this game halfway through the second quarter. They struggled so many times. I mean, heck, there was one case they missed easy field goals. There was a touchdown pass that should have been caught by Michael Brown-Stevens, clanked off him in the end zone. They intercepted. They couldn't find a way to finish the game. And it just shows you without Ibrahim right now, he is a big deal to that offense. And hopefully he comes back next week. The game that shocked me even more was Illinois going into Wisconsin and boat racing them.
Yeah.
Big time. I mean, I knew that Bielema was going to creating a different identity in Illinois. I didn't think it was going to happen this quick. I mean, Chase Brown is a legitimate running back in Champaign that a lot of people don't know because Illinois is just not that good of a program. And quite frankly, I don't know what's going on in Wisconsin. I mean, you look at the message boards and they're calling for Chris to get fired. I don't see that happening.
I told you that came out a couple weeks ago even.
Yeah.
After the Ohio State game, there was calls for his head, and people weren't happy with the Washington State loss. So you couple the Washington State loss, the Buckeye loss, and then yesterday getting routed by Illinois, especially considering that Brett Bielema was the former coach for Wisconsin. I think all that comes together and puts a lot of pressure on Chris now. I mean, let's be honest, they haven't really been Wisconsin for a couple of years now. I mean, this is 2 pretty solid down years in a row. I don't know how long they hold on. I mean, he may get another year, but if they suck like this next year, that could be it for dude. Don't you see?
I could. I mean, and I think their natural progression would be go to Jim Leonard. But, I mean, Jim Leonard gave up 34 last week to yesterday to Illinois. I mean, offensively, Braylon Allen's hardly getting any running room because that offensive line is just getting the crap pounded out of him, when's the last time you could say Wisconsin's offensive line hasn't been that good? I mean, they're just getting beat up quite a bit on that line of scrimmage. And when Graham Mertz has to throw more than 30 times a game, I'm sorry, Wisconsin's in trouble. I mean, the 5-star product out of Mission Beige in Kansas has not even come close to living up to expectations. I mean, yeah, he's got a big arm. So does Will Levis. Yeah, and Will Levis will not be a first-round draft pick in the NFL. And if he is, he'll be a bust. And it's just Wisconsin's just not a good team right now. And I can't tell if it's a culture problem, a locker room problem, or a talent problem.
I don't know. It's definitely, they're not the same up front as they have been. That's first and foremost. I have to give my player of the game, player of the week award for this game, and that is the Illinois defense. I mean, the front.
Yeah.
Wisconsin ran for 2 yards yesterday, bro.
Yeah.
You go back and you find me the last time that Wisconsin finished a game and had 2 yards rushing, 24 carries for 2 yards. If you incorporate the sack data, which college football does, they had 24 carries for 2 yards. The longest run all day for the Wisconsin Badgers was a 5-yard run by Chez Malusi. I've never seen anything like that. I think there's real problems in Wisconsin right now. They're now 2-3. They're 0-2 in the conference. As I mentioned, they lost to Washington State. The good news for them is that they have Northwestern coming up. That's two teams that are, both limping into a ball game. So maybe they can win that game. But other than that game, I'm not sure who they can beat. They probably have beat Northwestern, but then after that, they play Michigan State, Purdue, Maryland, Iowa, Nebraska, and Minnesota to finish out the season. This could be it for the Badgers as far as next week goes. I hope they beat Northwestern, because if they don't, that might be it for them. And I got to be honest, if they finish the year, 3-9, 4-8, that's not going to look good. And the fans up in Madison aren't going to put up with that crap.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, if there was a year you don't want to be going into a coaching search, I think this may be that year where there's going to be a lot of teams and not many coaches, and the bidding war could get quite high. I mean, because Nebraska is not going to fool around. They're going to throw a truckload of cash out. We all know Auburn's going to be out there. There's going to be other jobs available, and you don't want to have a time where you're sitting there waiting on other people for the guys you want, or you're going to have to overpay to get the guy you want. So
yeah, whoever's in need of a coach next year is going to have to pluck somebody away, in my opinion.
Yeah,
there's just not a ton of guys out there waiting for a job, so guys are going to have to be hired away. Before we get out of here, first off, I want to give credit. Friday night, I got a chance to sit down and watch the entirety of the UCLA Washington game. Nobody really gave the Bruins a chance in this one. A lot of people picked Washington to win this game, the way that Michael Penix and the Huskies have been playing. Kalen DeBoer has done a really good job up there, but I do think we need to recognize DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He was phenomenal in this game. Zach Charbonnet, the running back who we talked about a lot last year at UCLA. He was splitting time last year with Britton Brown, and this year he's the guy, and he's getting it done, man. I was really impressed with the UCLA offense. Scoring 40 points on Washington, who was 4-0 at the time, was impressive. Penix had some good numbers, threw for 345 yards and 4 touchdowns, but a lot of that, 16 of those points, and a lot of those yards came in the fourth quarter after the game was pretty much decided. So I'm very impressed. The thing that I've got to say about UCLA is, they've got those 3 guys that you need, and that's what I was kind of talking about with Clemson. I don't know who their number 1 wide receiver is, and Shipley is good, but he's not like a home run hitter in my opinion. UCLA's got 3 home run hitters. They've got DTR, they've got Zach Charbonnet, and then they've got Jake Bobo, who's turned into a phenomenal wide receiver. How far do you think this UCLA Bruins team can go? Are they potentially, alive in the Pac-12 race? And what's your thoughts on the Bruins?
I do. I mean, granted, I feel bad for the Bruins because when they play games at home, nobody shows up. I mean, there was one game where it was like 8,000 people at the Rose Bowl. It looked like there was nobody there because that place is so freaking big. I mean, you look back at the South Alabama game, they started off slow. The Bowling Green game, they started off slow. once they get going, that line of scrimmage play has been pretty impressive for the Bruins. And I think next week, home against Utah, fans in the LA area show up, because that game could dictate who plays for the Pac-12 title right there. I think UCLA is not getting near the credit they deserve, and that is going to be one hell of a game. Yeah,
they can beat Utah. I think they have a legitimate chance to win the conference and, be back. I mean, we talked about, Chip Kelly and the job he's done there. It's taken him some time, but, there wasn't a whole lot going on in UCLA country before Chip arrived. So let's be honest. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot to work with. And I think he's done a really good job considering the product that they had. So we'll see what happens there. Want to hit on, before we go, the Wake Forest Florida State game. Wake came back after a tough loss against Clemson, got it done against Florida State, and then I think I wasn't surprised, honestly, because I feel like Wake Forest is better than Florida State, but I just felt like they might win that game.
What do you think about Florida State at this point? And what was your thoughts on Wake coming back after that 2 overtime loss to Clemson?
I honestly thought that Norvell got outcoached in this game. I'm surprised they didn't try to run on them a little bit more. They kept throwing the ball over and over and over again. Where you could beat Wake Forest is on the ground, and they just didn't really utilize the ground game well enough at all. They tried to become more of a passing team, and that's really not who Jordan Travis really is. He's not a gunslinger. He's a good RPO, a run pass option quarterback, where running is his strength. And they got away from that, and they played into what Wake Forest wants to do. Wake Forest wants to make game to be up tempo, and you play at their style. And I mean, hell, they had 85 plays they ran yesterday to Florida State's 63?
Yeah. That's pretty impressive, but we got to give Wake some credit, I think, for bouncing back like that. I mean, coming back after a tough loss in 2 overtimes against Clemson in a game that they really, were hoping to win. I think there could have been a letdown this week. So to come out and take out Florida State 31-21 was impressive to me. And then, Georgia Tech fires their coach and wins a game. So, so addition by subtraction. They got rid of Jeff Collins, and then they took out Pittsburgh, even though, honestly, Pittsburgh played pretty well. Keaton Slovis had a really good game, and yet Georgia Tech still was able to come out with the victory, 26-21. And Kansas State continued their run after losing to Tulane. They've beaten Oklahoma and then took out Texas Tech yesterday, 37-28. So been pretty impressed with old Adrian Martinez the last 2 weeks. He's looked pretty good. What were your thoughts on those 2 games?
Adrian Martinez, honestly, as soon as I heard him make that move to Kansas State and looking at who his offensive coordinator is, I mean, he plays exactly like he did when he was there at Kansas State. And I knew that this could potentially be – Kansas State has the potential, like we talked about before, to play in the Big 12 championship. The problem is they can't have those, what the hell games like they did against Tulane. They got to go out there and press because a two-headed monster between Deuce Vaughn and Adrian Martinez, I mean, your linebackers have to have their heads on a swivel because one step, they're gone.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And that loss against Tulane was ugly, but I think it kind of fueled the fire in Adrian Martinez's belly. And Kansas State has looked like a different team ever since. And with Oklahoma going down and Baylor losing, Kansas State is right back in this race. And I think has a legitimate chance, as we talked about, to win the conference. So we'll see what happens. Looking towards next week, we've got a couple of pretty good games. Tennessee, LSU. We mentioned Texas, Oklahoma. Any other games sticking out to you next week besides obviously the one you mentioned, Utah, UCLA?
Honestly, not really. I think there's a lot of games where upsets could potentially happen. Uh, like
Which
the
ones?
game,
What are you picking? Who's upsetting who?
I think BYU could lose to Notre Dame.
Okay.
I think Notre Dame could get their act together because the team is really there to make that kind of run. Um,
I could see that.
Florida State, NC State. I mean, Florida State gets back to their running ways and be a run first team and pass as a secondary option. I could see them going into Raleigh and winning that game.
What
Yeah,
about Washington State and USC? Does Washington State have a chance in that one?
I would say normally yes, but that game's in LA and Washington State traditionally has not played well in the Coliseum. I was looking at that game pretty hard, and I just don't see Washington State doing it. Granted, they're playing really good ball, but that game 2 weeks ago against Oregon, how they let it go down the stretch, really kind of made me wonder because Cam Ward is playing way above his head. I mean, he really has been having a very decent season that a lot of people haven't been talking about overall.
I agree. I mean, I would love to see it, but I'll have to see it to believe it. I really do think Notre Dame can come back and pick up some momentum and take out BYU. I mean, they looked good against North Carolina. They found a way to win against Cal somehow, but I could see them trying to restart their season following a big game against BYU. Now, I was surprised that they had a bye this week so early in the season. I'm not sure. Not sure that's great, but the good news for them was they already had a ton of injuries on their offensive line and their wide receiver position, so it probably helped them a little bit, honestly, and they were probably okay to see that happen, especially so they had more time to prepare for this BYU team. So we'll see what happens, but should be another good week of college football. I think we hit on most of the good games. I'll be interested to see if Texas A&M even shows up to Tuscaloosa. They may not even go. They may just call it and be like, you know what, we're going to hand this one to you.
There's two other games I'm intrigued by before we go. Maryland, who's 4-1 right now, and people aren't really talking about, is playing pretty decent football. I mean, they beat Michigan State yesterday, play at home next week against Purdue. I think that's one of those, let's see who's really for real in that game. And that could really change some dynamics in that, especially with Maryland, the Big Ten East.
Yeah.
Michigan State is down. I mean, they could potentially be that number 4 team, maybe even number 3 if they could take out Penn State. And then Kansas, TCU, the battle of the unbeatens up in Lawrence. I mean,
yeah, College Game Day heading to Lawrence for the first time ever.
I'm interested to seeing how many points are going to be put up in that game and see what the over/under is, because I think that could potentially be an interesting game to watch. So,
yeah, I agree with you. I was also pretty high on Coach Leopold, and I thought he would have a good season, but I can tell you with 100% honesty,
yeah, I didn't see this.
I did not expect a 5-0 start. I mean, you go find me the article where somebody came out and said, "Oh, Kansas is going to be 5-0," because I didn't see that anywhere. I expect them to be ranked this week. Honestly,
they should be. They should have been last week. Honestly.
I agree with the 5-0 record. I mean, they beat Houston, they beat West Virginia, they beat undefeated Duke, they beat Iowa State. At this point, 5-0 is looking pretty good, and if they can beat TCU, they've got Oklahoma and Baylor, Oklahoma State coming up. They've got a tough stretch to finish out the season, but hell, why not? Maybe it's the year of the Jayhawk.
You know something? If they start out the year 6-0, I don't care what anybody says. Lance Leopold deserves to be Big 12 Coach of the Year. And if they go to 8-4, he deserves to be National Coach of the Year, because this turnaround has been amazing in Lawrence.
I agree. It's been fun to watch, and I think he deserves a ton of credit. I just hope that he stays there.
I do too.
And continues it, because honestly, people are going to be calling him even now.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Auburn's going to call him. Nebraska's going to call him. Wisconsin's going to call him. I mean, I think at a minimum, this guy's going to make $7-8 million.
Yeah.
But imagine if he stays. I mean, Kansas could give him anything he wants, and it may not even need to be money. It just needs to be length of term, kind of like the Mike Stoops contract,
Yeah.
where, let's be honest, at KU, the bar's pretty low. You get the 8 wins every year, they're going to be happy as a clam.
Yeah, well, let's be honest. There hadn't been any type of pulse in the Kansas program since Mangino left, a long time ago. So I think they would behoove themselves to do everything they can to try and keep this guy put.
I love the hire when they made it. I'm more impressed now.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I got another question for you.
Sure.
Tennessee, LSU next week in Baton Rouge, the big red stick. Who's winning that game?
Do you even have to ask?
I want to know.
I think Tennessee's going to boat race them. I don't think LSU's that good. I really don't. I mean, they're like the worst 4-1 team. They should have lost last night to Auburn, and Auburn sucks.
They were up 17-0.
How in the world did Mississippi State lose to them? I'm like, I honest to God, like Mike Leach, he can win games where he just sits there and crushes teams.
But he loses a lot of games that he has no business losing.
Exactly. And it just boggles my mind. And
it's been like that everywhere he's been.
I know.
At Washington State, that happened. At Texas Tech, that would happen. He'd win these big games that he really shouldn't have won. And then the next week they lose to some team that they had no business losing to.
I mean, there were so many Apple Cups at Washington State that they lost where I just sat there and I'm like, how is this even possible? But they find a way. And
just on the LSU, the LSU Auburn game yesterday, I don't know if you watched that. I went back and watched it. It was brutal. It was hard to watch. Auburn football is just excruciatingly hard to watch. And LSU is not far behind. Jaden Daniels finished the game yesterday 8 of 20 for 80 yards passing. He's like a running back that they put behind center because he's their only guy. I mean, he's their number one rusher, but he can't really throw the ball. So I don't know what the hell they're doing with that offense, but it is god awful. And the fact that they were able to come back and win that game really surprised me, honestly.
I mean, Keyshawn Boutte has just got to be so upset right now. Like, honest to God, I'm shocked he hasn't transferred other than he's like, screw it, I'm just going to wait the year out and go to the draft.
Yeah, I can't believe that he hasn't quit because he's destroying his draft stock right now.
Yeah.
His stats are just god-awful, horrible. I feel bad for him, honestly, because this just doesn't look good for him. I think he has 11 catches for 97 yards on the season, no touchdowns.
In the Florida State game, I questioned if he was even playing. He was hardly on the field. I'm like, it's one thing if he's on the field, but he's not even on the field.
Well, yeah, I went to ESPN the other day and I clicked on his name and it says, class junior, height, weight, 6 feet, 205, birthplace, New Iberia, Louisiana, status, active. And I was like, oh, okay. He is active. That's good to know because I had no idea.
I was the same way.
It's pretty rough. We got a question here. Who is the best college kicker in football?
Right now? I'd go Harrison Mevis from Missouri.
Hey, you know what? He looked pretty damn good yesterday. Hey, Whitey, I don't know if you saw him, but he is short, he is fat, and he's got a big leg. But
he's in shape. Round's a shape. Round's a shape. I mean, heck, Mangino was in shape too. He's round.
He is round. That is a shape. I guess that's true. My daughter can attest to that. A circle is a shape. A sphere is a shape, even if it's a big one. But yeah, no, he looked like the best kicker yesterday. He almost, what do you have, 5 field goals in that game?
Well, he had a 56-yarder too that I swear to God he could have kicked from freaking Kansas City to St. Louis.
I also don't know if you've noticed, but if you go look on that 4th and 1 play where Georgia scored the touchdown, there was a false start.
Yeah.
That the refs did not call. So that could have. I'm not saying that would have changed the outcome in the game, but definitely would have scooted them back 5 yards and made it 4th and 6. You know what I'm saying?
Put it this way: if Mizzou would have knocked off Georgia, you and I both know what the hour would have been about.
The whole game, yeah.
The whole game. I mean, honest to God, I'm not going to lie. I was cheering for Mizzou to win that game just because it's like the little engine that could. Kind of like when Stanford beat USC when they were like, 50-point dogs?
Yeah.
I'm like, because it would be so funny to watch something like that go down, you know?
Oh, I was cheering for it very hard, but I knew that it was going to be tough for Mizzou to hang on that long.
Oh, God, yeah.
And they were playing conservative, too, at the end. And I'm like, man, this is not how you're going to win this game. If you want to win the game, you got to take some shots.
Not only that, I mean, that walk-on running back, that Schraber kid, that was a transfer from Truman State D2. I mean, you look at his numbers from high school, this kid put on a freaking show at Lutheran South, which is a power program in the Missouri area. And just because of his metrics, became a D2 kid. But you look at him, he could play D1. Just metrics was the only thing holding him back.
Yeah, well, he had a pretty good game yesterday against supposedly the best defense in college football. So we'll see what happens. But we got another big week next week. We just got some predictions from JB James Bonneville. We'll see if those come true. I do agree with you. I think Tennessee's going to rock LSU. The offense is just going to be too much for LSU's defense to handle. And then, as we just talked about, LSU doesn't have any offense. So I think Tennessee wins by 3 touchdowns.
Agreed.
That's going to be a big victory for them. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. Thank you for the questions, Whitey White. Have a good rest of the weekend, and we'll talk to everybody again real soon, okay?